Some secrets are too heavy for a child to carry, but too dangerous for a family to hear. What would you do if the very man your family trusted the most was the same man who stole your innocence? Grace carried this secret for 3 years, until one day, in front of the entire family, she spoke the truth that no one wanted to hear. This is the story of the girl who exposed her uncle's secret and changed everything. In the heart of Lagos, where the morning sun painted golden streaks across corrugated iron roofs, lived a girl whose smile had died long before her childhood ended. Grace was her name, though Grace had abandoned her life 3 years ago when she turned 12. The compound buzzed with the usual morning chaos, vendors calling their wares, children's laughter echoing from the courtyard, and the rhythmic pounding of yam in wooden mortars. But Grace didn't hear any of it. She sat on the edge of her bed staring at the calendar on the cracked wall, counting days like a prisoner counts freedom. "Grace, come and help with breakfast," her mother's voice rang out from the kitchen. Grace's hands trembled as she stood. Every morning was the same nightmare. She would have to pass by Uncle Samuel's room, and every morning his eyes would follow her like a hungry predator watching prey. Uncle Samuel, her father's younger brother, the man everyone called the family pillar, the successful businessman who sent money home every month, and whose presence made her grandmother beam with pride. "Good morning, Uncle," Grace whispered as she hurried past his doorway, her head down, her shoulders hunched inwards like she was trying to disappear into herself. "Good morning, my dear Grace." His voice was honey sweet, the same voice that had whispered threats in her ear for 3 long years. "You look beautiful this morning." The words hit her like ice water. Beautiful. The word that had become her curse. She quickened her pace, but not before catching the familiar glint in his eyes, that look that made her skin crawl and her stomach twist into knots. In the kitchen, her mother, Patience, was already frying plantains, humming softly to herself. Grace envied her mother's innocence, her ability to see good in everyone, especially Uncle Samuel, who helped the family so much. "You are quiet this morning, my daughter," Patience observed, not looking up from the sizzling pan. "Are you feeling well?" Grace wanted to scream. She wanted to fall to her knees and tell her mother everything. How Uncle Samuel's hands wandered where they shouldn't, how he cornered her when no one was watching, how he had stolen pieces of her soul night after night. But the words stuck in her throat like thorns. "I'm fine, Mama." The lie tasted bitter, but it was safer than the truth. Because 3 years ago, when she had tried to tell her cousin Mary what Uncle Samuel did, Mary slapped her and called her a liar. "Uncle Samuel is a good man. How dare you say such evil things about him?" Since then, Grace had learned that silence was survival. But secrets have a weight of their own, and Grace was drowning under theirs. 2 weeks later, the family compound was buzzing with unusual excitement. Papa, Grace's grandfather, had called for a family meeting. Such meetings were rare and always meant something important was about to happen. Everyone must be there, Papa had declared in his commanding voice, that still carried authority despite his 78 years. "Even the children. We have important matters to discuss." Grace felt her stomach tighten as she watched relatives streaming into the compound. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even some she hadn't seen in months. Uncle Samuel arrived in his shiny black car, dressed in his expensive agbada, gold chains gleaming around his neck. Everyone rushed to greet him, shake his hand, thank him for his generosity. "Samuel, my son," Papa embraced him warmly. "The pride of our family." Grace watched from the corner, invisible as always. She saw how Uncle Samuel's eyes scanned the crowd until they found her. He smiled, that same smile that haunted her dreams, and her blood turned to ice.
The meeting began under the big mango tree in the center of the compound. Papa stood in the middle, his walking stick planted firmly in the red earth, his white beard flowing like a patriarch from ancient stories. "My family," Papa began, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd of over 30 people. "I have called you here today because our Samuel has brought us great news." All eyes turned to Uncle Samuel, who stood proudly beside Papa. Grace's hands began to shake. "Tell them, my son," Papa encouraged. Uncle Samuel cleared his throat, his voice booming with confidence. "My beloved family, I have been blessed by God with a great business opportunity. I am expanding my import business, and I need a trusted family member to help me. Someone young, someone I can train properly." Grace's mother leaned forward eagerly. Grace could see the hope shining in her mother's eyes, hope for a better future for her family. "I have been watching our children," Uncle Samuel continued, his eyes sliding toward Grace like a snake approaching its prey. "And I believe Grace would be perfect for this opportunity." The compound erupted in murmurs of excitement and approval. Grace felt the world spinning around her. Her breath came in short gasps. "No, no, no. Grace would live with me in my house in Victoria Island." And Ibikul continued, "I would pay for her education in the best schools, give her everything she needs. She would learn the business and become successful like her uncle." "Praise God!" Patience clapped her hands, tears of joy streaming down her face. "Samuel, you are truly our blessing." Other family members joined in the celebration. "Grace is so lucky. What an opportunity. Samuel, you are too kind." But Grace heard none of the celebration. All she could hear was the pounding of her own heart, the roar of blood in her ears. She looked around desperately, but everyone was smiling, clapping, celebrating what they thought was wonderful news. Uncle Samuel's eyes found hers across the crowd. He winked. That wink was like a match lit in a room full of gasoline. Something snapped inside Grace at that moment. 3 years of silence, 3 years of shame, 3 years of carrying a secret that was eating her alive from the inside. It all erupted at once. Grace stood up. The celebration died as all eyes turned to the 15-year-old girl who had suddenly risen from her corner like a spirit emerging from the shadows. "No," Grace said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What did you say, my daughter?" Papa asked, confusion creasing his weathered face. "I said no." Grace's voice was stronger now, cutting through the silence like a machete through tall grass. "Grace," her mother hissed, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "Sit down. What is wrong with you?" But Grace was beyond caring about embarrassment now. The volcano inside her had finally erupted, and there was no stopping the lava flow. "I will not go with Uncle Samuel," Grace declared, her voice ringing across the compound. "And do you want to know why?" The compound fell into a silence so deep you could hear the wind rustling through the mango leaves. 30 pairs of eyes stared at Grace as if she had sprouted horns. Uncle Samuel's face had gone pale beneath his dark skin. "Grace, my dear, what's wrong? Are you not feeling well?" His voice was gentle, concerned, the same voice he used in public, so different from the harsh whispers in dark rooms. But Grace saw through it now. She saw the calculation in his eyes, the way his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. "There's nothing wrong with me," Grace said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "But there's everything wrong with you, Uncle Samuel." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Patience jumped to her feet, her face burning with shame. Grace, apologize to your uncle right now. What has gotten into you? Mama. Grace turned to her mother, tears streaming down her face, but her voice steady as rock. Do you want to know why I wake up screaming at night? Do you want to know why I can't eat? Why I flinch when anyone touches me? Grace, stop this nonsense. Papa's voice boomed with authority. Samuel is your elder. You will show respect. But Grace had crossed the line now. The dam had burst and the truth came flooding out like water through a broken wall. Uncle Samuel has been for 3 years, Grace announced, her words cutting through the air like lightning splitting the sky. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that compound. Someone's baby started crying in the distance, but even that sound seemed muffled, as if the very air had thickened with shock. Uncle Samuel's face went through a series of expressions. Shock, then anger, then calculated hurt. He placed his hand over his heart like a man who had been stabbed. My God, he whispered, his voice breaking with what sounded like genuine pain. Grace, my child, what are you saying? Why would you tell such lies about your own uncle who loves you? Lies? Lies? You want me to tell them about your hands? About what you do when no one is watching? About how you threaten me if I tell anyone? The family members began murmuring among themselves, their voices rising like the buzz of angry bees. I could hear fragments of their whispered conversations. Such a serious accusation. But Samuel is such a good man. Maybe the girl is sick. Teenagers these days. And Blessing, Uncle Samuel's older sister, stood up abruptly. Her face was twisted with rage, but it wasn't directed at her brother. Grace! Auntie Blessing's voice cracked like a whip. How dare you bring such shame upon this family? Samuel has done nothing but good for us. He pays school fees, he sends money, he helps everyone. And this is how you repay him, with wicked lies? They are not lies, Grace screamed, but her voice was drowned out by the rising chorus of family members taking Uncle Samuel's side. The girl is disturbed. She's jealous of Samuel's success. This is what happens when children watch too much television. Grace looked desperately around the circle of faces. Faces that had once smiled at her, relatives who had once called her our precious Grace. Now they looked at her like something dirty, something shameful. Her mother, Patience, was crying quietly, but she couldn't tell if the tears were from shock, shame, or heartbreak. Mama, Grace pleaded, reaching toward her mother. Mama, please believe me, please.
Uncle Samuel stood up slowly, his movements deliberate and calculated. He had recovered from his initial shock and now moved like a man who knew exactly how to handle a crisis. This wasn't his first time being accused, Grace realized with growing horror. He had done this before. My beloved family, Uncle Samuel began, his voice heavy with sadness and disappointment. I am heartbroken, truly heartbroken. This child who I have loved as my own daughter, who I wanted to give every opportunity to. He paused, letting his words sink in. Grace watched in amazement as several family members nodded sympathetically. Uncle Samuel was a master manipulator, and she was watching him walk. I think, Uncle Samuel continued, his voice breaking slightly, that Grace is sick. This kind of fantasy, it's not uncommon in young girls. They see things on television, they hear stories, and sometimes their minds. He tapped his temples sadly, the gesture speaking volumes. You are lying, Grace shouted, but her voice sounded shrill and desperate even to her own ears. I'm not sick. I'm not making this up. Papa raised his walking stick for silence. When he spoke, his voice was cold as winter rain. Grace, you will go to your room immediately. We will not have this kind of behavior in our family meeting. Papa, please, now! Papa's roar silenced even the compound birds. But Grace didn't move. She couldn't move. This was her one chance, maybe her only chance to speak the truth. If she walked away now, she would never have another opportunity. I won't be silent anymore, Grace said, her voice quieter now, but somehow more powerful. I've been silent for 3 years and it almost killed me. I won't protect his reputation anymore. Uncle Samuel's mask slipped for just a moment, and Grace saw the flash of pure hatred in his eyes before he composed himself again. You see, Uncle Samuel said sadly to the gathering, she's not well, but I don't blame her.
I blame myself for not seeing the signs earlier. Aunt Mary, Grace's father's sister, stood up. Her face was hard as stone. Grace, Aunt Mary's voice was ice cold. Do you understand what you are trying to do here? You are trying to destroy a good man's reputation. Samuel has helped this entire family. He paid for your cousin John's university education. He built the new kitchen for your grandmother. He sends money every month to help feed and clothe you ungrateful children. I don't care about his money, Grace cried. I'd rather starve than— You'd rather starve? Aunt Mary's voice rose to a shriek. You spoiled child. Do you know what life would be like for this family without Samuel's help? Do you want your younger brothers and sisters to drop out of school? Do you want your grandmother to die because we can't afford her medicine? Grace looked around desperately. Surely someone would speak for her. Surely someone would question why a 15-year-old girl would make such a horrible story about her own uncle. But she saw only cold faces, disappointed faces, angry faces. Even her cousins, girls her own age who should have understood, were looking at her like she had committed the worst sin imaginable. The weight of their collective disapproval pressed down on her like a physical force. Grace felt herself beginning to crumble under it. Grace, Papa's voice had softened slightly, but it still carried absolute authority. You will apologize to your uncle immediately. Then you will go to your room and think about what you've done. Tomorrow we will take you to see Pastor Johnson. Maybe he can help you with these problems you are having. Grace looked at Uncle Samuel. He was watching her with those predator eyes again, but now there was triumph in them. He knew he had won. The family had chosen him over her, just as he had always known they would. I won't apologize, Grace whispered, because I didn't do anything wrong. The collective gasp from the family was like a wind through dry leaves. Then you are no longer welcome in this meeting, Papa declared. Go to your room, now. As Grace turned to leave, she heard Uncle Samuel's voice behind her, soft and filled with false sadness. I forgive you, Grace. When you are feeling better, when you are ready to tell the truth, I will still be here for you. The family murmured their approval of his graciousness. What a good man, they whispered. What patience he has with this troubled girl. Grace walked away on shaking legs, but she didn't go to her room. Instead, she climbed the narrow stairs to the roof of the building, where she could still hear everything happening below.
On the rooftop, Grace crouched behind the water tank and listened as her life was decided without her. The family meeting continued below, but now the topic had changed from Uncle Samuel's business opportunity to the problem of Grace. She needs help, she heard Aunt Blessing saying. Professional help. This kind of behavior is not normal. Maybe we should send her to the village for a while, another voice suggested. Let her grandmother discipline her properly. Or to that boarding school run by the nuns. They know how to handle difficult girls. Grace pressed her hands over her ears, but she could still hear them planning her future. A future that would take her far away from everyone she knew, labeling her as the problem, the liar, the disturbed child who had tried to destroy a good man's reputation. She thought about jumping. For a moment, the idea seemed almost peaceful. Just one step off the edge, and all the pain would stop. No more nightmares, no more shame, no more carrying secrets that were too heavy for her young shoulders. But then she heard something that made her freeze. It was her cousin Sarah's voice, barely above a whisper, speaking to another cousin near the edge of the compound. Happened to me too. What did you say? The other cousin asked. Nothing, Sarah said quickly. I said nothing. But Grace had heard. Sarah knew. Sarah had experienced it too. Suddenly, Grace realized she wasn't alone. Uncle Samuel hadn't chosen just her. She was probably not his only victim. A new feeling began to grow in Grace's chest. Not hope exactly, but something stronger than despair. If there were others, if she could find them, maybe they could stand together. Maybe the truth was stronger than one man's reputation. Grace climbed down from the roof and slipped quietly to the back of the compound, where Sarah was now standing alone, looking lost and frightened. Sarah, Grace whispered. Her cousin jumped like she'd been stung.
"Grace, you scared me. You should be in your room. Everyone is angry." "He did it to you too, didn't he?" Grace interrupted. Sarah's face went white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Uncle Samuel, he touched you. He hurt you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head frantically. "No, no, Grace, you can't ask me to." "Sarah, please, I'm drowning here. They all think I'm lying, but you know I'm not. You know." Sarah looked toward the front of the compound where the family meeting was still in progress, then back at Grace. Her whole body was trembling. "If I say anything, they would destroy me too. You see how they are treating you. At least he stopped with me when I got older, but if I speak up now." "How many others are there?" Grace asked quietly. Her silence was answer enough. "This is why he chose you for the business opportunity, isn't it? Not because you're smart or capable, but because you're his favorite victim and he wants easier access." Sarah started crying quietly. "Grace, please, don't make me do this. Please. I have a boyfriend now. I'm planning to get married if it comes out." Grace felt a familiar despair creeping back in. Even Sarah, who knew the truth, who had lived the same nightmare, wouldn't stand with her. But then Grace heard footsteps approaching, heavy footsteps, Uncle Samuel's footsteps. "Girls," his voice called out cheerfully, "what are you doing back here? Grace, your family is looking for you." Sarah melted away into the shadows like smoke, leaving Grace alone with the man who had stolen her childhood. Uncle Samuel approached slowly, and Grace could see that his public mask had fallen away. His eyes were hard and cold. "You've made quite a scene tonight, my dear. But it's over now. They chose me, just like I knew they would, just like they always do." "There are others," Grace said, her voice steady despite her terror. "I'm going to find them." Uncle Samuel smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Grace had ever seen. "Good luck with that," he said. "But remember, Grace, you're just a crazy girl now. Who is going to believe anything you say?"
3 months later, Grace sat in the small office of Mrs. Adora Okafor, a social worker who specialized in cases of child abuse. It had taken Grace 2 months to find someone who would listen to her, and another month to convince her mother to bring her to this meeting. The family had tried everything to fix Grace after her outburst at the meeting. They'd taken her to pastors who prayed over her for deliverance from lying spirits. They'd sent her to a traditional healer who declared she was possessed by evil ancestors. They'd even tried to send her to a psychiatric hospital until a doctor there asked too many questions about why a 15-year-old would make up such specific accusations. Through it all, Grace had refused to recant her story. She'd stopped trying to convince her family, but she never stopped believing her own truth. And slowly, word had gotten out to people beyond the family compound. "Grace," Mrs. Okafor said gently, "I want you to know that what you did at that family meeting was incredibly brave. Most girls your age would never have found the courage to speak up." "It didn't matter," Grace said bitterly. "Nobody believed me anyway." "But that's not true," Mrs. Okafor smiled. "Your story reached someone who did believe you. That's how you ended up here." Grace looked up, confused. "What do you mean?" Mrs. Okafor opened a file on her desk. 3 weeks ago, we received a call from a young woman named Sarah. She said she had information about a man named Samuel who was abusing children in his family. She said a girl named Grace had tried to expose him, but nobody would listen. Grace's heart stopped. "Sarah called you?" "She did. And Grace, she wasn't the only one. After Sarah came forward, 2 other cousins contacted us, and the neighbor girl and..." Mrs. Okafor paused. "And Uncle Samuel's own housemaid from 5 years ago, who's now 19 and finally ready to speak." Grace felt like she was floating.
They are all willing to testify? They are. Because you spoke up first. Because you refused to be silenced. Even when your own family turned against you, you gave them permission to tell their truth. Tears were streaming down Grace's face now, but for the first time in years, they weren't tears of despair. What happens now? Grace asked. Now Uncle Samuel is arrested. Now there's a trial. Now the truth comes out, no matter how much it hurts or how many people don't want to hear it. Grace's mother, Patience, who had been silent throughout the meeting, finally spoke up. Her voice was small and broken. Grace, I'm so sorry. I should have listened. I should have believed my own daughter. Grace looked at her mother, really looked at her. She saw the shame and regret in Patience's eyes, but she also saw love. Complicated, imperfect, but genuine love. Mama, Grace said softly, I forgive you, but you have to promise me something. Anything. Promise me you believe the next girl who speaks up. Promise me you protect the children, not the adults who hurt them. Patience nodded, tears flowing freely now. I promise, my daughter. I promise. 6 months later, Uncle Samuel was sentenced to 15 years in prison. The trial had torn the family apart. Some members still refused to believe the truth, even with 5 witnesses testifying. But others, including Papa himself, had finally opened their eyes. Grace didn't return to live with her extended family. Instead, she moved to Abuja with Mrs. Okafor's help, where she continued her education and began working with other survivors of abuse. She learned that healing wasn't a destination, but a journey, and that speaking her truth was just the first step on a very long road. But every time she met another girl who was carrying secrets too heavy for her young shoulders, Grace would tell her story. Not the sanitized version that people preferred to hear, but the real story. The story of a girl who chose truth over family approval, justice over silence, and her own dignity over everyone else's comfort. Your truth matters, she would tell these girls, and silence only protects the guilty, never the innocent. Grace learned that sometimes saving yourself means losing everyone you thought loved you, but it also means finding out who truly loves you. And more importantly, it means learning to love yourself enough to demand the respect and protection you deserve. The girl who had once been voiceless found her voice, and she would never be silent again. The moral: silence protects the guilty, not the innocent. When we choose family reputation over children's safety, we become part of the problem. True love sometimes means believing difficult truths and protecting the vulnerable even when it's uncomfortable or inconvenient. If this story touched your heart, share it. Subscribe to our channel for more African folk tales that challenge us to be better, to do better. And remember, if you know a child who needs someone to listen, be that person. Your belief might be the lifeline they desperately need. Remember, in every community, in every family, there are graces who need their voices heard. The question isn't whether abuse happens in good families. The question is whether we are brave enough to listen when children try to tell us the truth.